We've got quite a week ahead of us. I want to say, and I don't say this often, I want to say, I want you to really bank this week. I want you to really think about this week as being a little bit of, I'm not sure I'm going to call it springtime, but in the spring we plant seeds. And we plant seeds in the darkness. We plant seeds in the soil, right? And we have to kind of sit and have the faith that those seeds are going to eventually emerge into fruition. They're going to grow into little baby plants. And I feel like this week's theme is very similar. It's certainly a really powerful check in on where we're at with our dreaming, with our connection to our vision of what we want to be building. It's definitely a week of going, deep. It's Scorpio season, right? Going deep into the underworld and really exploring some very, very important themes. So before we get started, I just want to check in. I'm going to check in just briefly and just make sure all my tech is working since I'm trying something new. So give me half a second here. And yes, seemingly it is working. Okay, good. All right, seems to be working. So, a couple of things. First of all, if you have been following me for a while, you know that every year I publish what I call the Evolution Guide. That is a book, or in some cases, a journal. Last year we did it as a journal, or this year we did it as a journal, that walks you through the weekly transits. It takes you through the celestial weather themes in the conscious sun, conscious earth. It's paired with EFT setups and contemplations, journaling prompts, all kinds of really juicy things to think about every week as we go through over the span of the human design year. The sun transits through all the 64 gates. Last year we did the spiral bound. It got complicated. And it got complicated because it was very hard to ship the spiral bound or to get the spiral bound out to faraway places like Australia and Canada. So we went back this year to the old format. So the 2026 Quantum Human Design Evolution Guide is now available. It is for sale. I'm sorry, guys. I know it's only on Amazon. It might be on Barnes and Noble. I think it's on Barnes and Noble and Amazon. It's not going to have as wide of a distribution because it's a small run. But the 2026 guide is now available for sale, both in ebook format and in hard format. It is, if you've gotten ours in our evolution guides in the past, it's a little bit thicker than the old version. It has a lot of introductory material in the beginning to help you sort of look at the impact of how the transits affect your chart. It also has an expanded reader resource section. So last year, as I said, we did it as a spiral bound, and you actually could journal in it. This is not the best format for journaling in it because the binding is not going to make it a whole year if you keep going through it to write in it. So what I did do is I took the journaling pages from the 2025 guide, I put them in a PDF format, and you can, once you get the book, you can go to the reader resource page and download the journal pages if you want to, and print them up yourself if you want to follow along in that format. So anyway, I'm very excited about it. I'm always excited when it comes out. I'll tell you why I'm really excited about it. Buckle up, because this is important. I think next year's going to be better. I think that, we're still in a massive season of disruption. If you look at the celestial weather, it has been bumpy. It has been bumpy for years and years. We are in a season of destruction or deconstruction, and simultaneously entering a season of reconstruction or creation. And we're in this place right now where we're holding both. And it's been hard. It's been a very difficult year. It's probably going to continue to be difficult, I think, until maybe February of next year. But it is going to get easier. Certainly, I'm going to say the celestial weather is going to support us more in the idea of creating revolution, creating change. And revolution is powerful. Revolution takes time, and it takes repetition, and it takes cohesion, and it takes community, and it takes intention. And the celestial weather coming in for 2026 really supports that creation side of the equation and not as much of the destruction side of the creation. So buckle up, because I think it's gonna get a lot better. And I'm gonna say this week is gonna give us a little bit of a preview. This week gives us the opportunity to kind of really set in motion some manifestations, if you will, on an accelerated pace, in an amplified way. And of course, that requires of us first, and it has been requiring of us all year, to do the work. We have to do the work. And I was literally talking yesterday to somebody who is helping me with messaging and how do we have the greatest amount of impact. And one of the things that's always challenging for us is that there's no work around the work. And that's not a very sexy marketing message, right? Everybody wants the hack. There's no hack. You got to do the work. That is actually why I wrote Quantum Wellness, because it gives you a very systematic approach to get into your human design chart and do the work. Next week, starting on Monday, November the 3rd, I think it's the 3rd, Monday, November the 3rd, I'm going to be leading a 5-day masterclass series about Designed to Thrive. So if you love human design, if you want to learn more about your chart, you want to learn more about human design, you want to learn more about what's going on in the future, where are we headed, and why is human design so vital? If you want to look at the relationship between your chart and money, your chart and your relationships, your chart and even your body, we're going to be talking about all of that next week. So bring your chart. Teresa's going to post the registration link below. She's also going to post the link to the 2026 Evolution Guide into Quantum Wellness below. But show up next week. I'm going to say this. Even if you're like, oh, I know my design, I've been doing it for a long time, come anyway. There's something so profound in human design about the basics that, it's easy to gloss through those. We always want to go straight to the gates, right? The gates are exciting. But really, the crux of human design, the fulcrum for where the change is going to happen if you follow your design, lives in strategy and authority. Because that's where the prescription, the healing path for bringing you back into your body, reconnecting you with that visceral truth, reconnecting you with your decision-making capacity, giving you what you need individually based on your chart to drown out the noise, right? To drown out all the shoulds and all the logic and all the conditioning. That strategy and authority piece, and really understanding your type, that's the main character in your story, solidifies and sort of makes the rest of living true to your chart very easy. Certainly easier. So even if you know the basics, it's always good to get a refresher. We're not only going to be talking about the basics anyway. And of course, when I talk about human design, I'm always evolving the conversation, because I think human design in and of itself is an evolutionary tool, and the way in which we understand the chart changes with time. All right, we are closing on a major energetic cycle this week, one that's been teaching us, one that's been precise, and it's really been giving us a curriculum on the power and the importance of mindset. So, and not just mindset, but the importance of, once we cultivate the mindset, of letting go, of trusting the process, right? Which is not always so easy, because we want to figure it out, right? The nodes, the South Node, which has been highlighting the gate 47, the gate of mindset, the North Node, which has been highlighting the gate 22, the gate of surrender. This is the final week of that nodal position. We've been in that nodal position since June. And so we've been immersed since June in a curriculum of really remembering and realizing and practicing and observing how our thinking shapes the frequency of what we attract. And of course, we've also been looking at our willingness to let go and practicing letting go and letting go of thinking we have to know what's next, of really literally just being present to the process. And of course, we've been learning, courtesy of these nodes, that we don't make things happen through effort. Yes, there's work to be done, no doubt, right? You can't just sit there and ohm your way into manifesting, although theoretically some people can, but most of us can't, right? But we have to have, that ease of right timing, right place, that synchronicity of opportunity, and all of that is initiated by mindset and by our willingness to trust the process, by our willingness to really have faith. Manifesting isn't about control. Manifesting is about stewardship. It's about the conscious tending of the dream, which leads me into this week. Okay, so this week the sun highlights the gate 28 until Friday. The gate 28, which gets a bad rap, I think, in traditional human design. The gate 28, the gate of struggle, is what they call it in traditional human design. We call it the gate of adventure or challenge in traditional human design. Now, we have been all month long, and it'll continue for a wee bit more. We've been going through all of the gates around the spleen center. And so that sets us up. We've had for the last month and for the next little bit, we have this curriculum of confronting our fears. This curriculum of really asking ourselves, am I creating with fear or am I creating with faith, right? This is the theme of the solar plexus chakra. And of course, the solar plexus chakra in human design, we know split in 1781 into the spleen center or the self-actualization center in quantum human design, and the emotional solar plexus in traditional human design, or the creative center in quantum human design. That split really has set us up for the last 400 years to really learn about faith, to learn about faith through the lens of faith being a vibrational frequency, right? It's the expectation, the belief that whatever it is you're envisioning on the internal plane will manifest on the external plane. And of course, the more we move into a state of self-love, the more we value ourselves, the more we're willing to allow ourselves to receive, and the more faith we have that we can receive, that we can allow the creation of whatever it is that we're dreaming of. What does that have to do with the gate 28, you ask? Here's what that has to do with the gate 28. That gate 28, first of all, is the companion to the gate 55, right? If we look across to the other side of the chart, it's the mirror to the gate 55. That gate 55 is faith. The gate 28 is where the big dream lives. That 28-38 channel connecting the root to the spleen center on the left-hand side of the chart, that is where your dreaming lives. Now, here's some things to think about. First of all, we cultivate meaning when we're challenged. I don't know where it was this. I went to a lot of lectures this weekend. I went to a really interesting conference called WisConfluence. And they talked a lot about the future and community. But somewhere in one of the lectures that I saw, somebody said that there was a story, and I can't even remember what sacred text it was in, but the story was that God put struggle in the human story because we need struggle to grow. We need struggle to grow. And part of the struggle of the gate 28 is pushing against things in order to really discover what's really valuable. And that's why when we look at what the 28 is grounded in, the 28 is grounded in the gate 27, which is one of the places where our values lives in the chart. It's also where accountability and responsibility lives. And so to a certain degree, I like to interpret the 28 and the 27 together as we have an obligation to become stewards for our dreams. That's kind of what we started with, right? We have an obligation to become stewards for our dreams. You're given a dream. Every one of us has our own dreams, and every one of us literally has specific dreams that only we can fulfill. Those are dreams that are tied directly to your personal narrative, your story, your reason for being here, your big why. Only you can fulfill that big why. That's your job, right? You came here to be in this story, the story of you. And in this story, you have an obligation to fulfill the full potential of that story. You are a steward, in essence, of your personal story. I like using the word steward because it takes kind of the personal stuff out of it so we don't get too caught up in the ego conversation. And we instead can say, okay, if I take a big step back and I look at my life, and I look at my life as a story, and I think, oh, I'm in this story, I'm responsible for this story. I have ownership over the story. I have stewardship over the story. And I like stewardship better than ownership because ownership is sort of time limited and it's kind of constricting. Stewardship means your story, the story of who you are, is a very important part of the legacy of the human beings on this planet. You play a unique and vital and irreplaceable role in the human story. The human story is what it is because of you. And when you fulfill that role, you're adding not only to you and your life and your family and your community, but you're also adding to the human story. And so there's a really an interesting obligation with that fulfillment. Now, the gate 28 is the place where we have big dreams. It's big dreaming energy. And part of what happens in that struggle is we have to struggle a little bit, push against things to discover what is ours to create. And how do we cultivate meaning and passion and fire around that thing that is ours to create? And for a lot of us, because we've been so deeply entrained, and this is where the nodal themes come in, that we can't do the dream if we don't have the instruction manual, right? If you don't know how, you can't have the dream. That's where the word dreamer becomes a bad word, right? When we say to people, oh my God, you're such a dreamer. That's not an insult. That's not an insult. It should never be an insult. People who are dreamers are creatives. People who are dreamers are seeding the quantum field with possibility. Be a dreamer. But part of what happens is in the shadow, we get afraid that our dreams are too big, or we get afraid that they're too difficult, or that we don't know how, or it's going to be too challenging. And what a lot of us do is we downgrade the dream. We settle, we compromise, we make it less than what we actually really want. And we think, well, this is what's feasible. I'll do the feasible thing. The big dream is cool, but who's going to make that happen? That's not realistic, right? But here's the thing. When we settle for less, we literally lose the very spark that animates us and the dream. And is as counterintuitive as it sounds, we actually burn out when we downsize the dream. We burn ourselves out when we settle for less. We lose our drive. We lose our motivation and we settle for meh, right? And this is especially true for our generators, right? We settle for meh. And when we settle for meh, for 50%, a half dream, then because our rest of us is screaming, our soul is screaming like, wait, what? Why are we settling for less? And when we settle for less and we downsize the dream, then we numb out, right? We can't manage the low grade frustration. We can't deal with the just that horrible feeling of like, I know there's more, don't know what to do, don't know how to access it. That dissonance that comes from settling is something that we ultimately have to numb, or else it's very, very, it can be very, very painful. And so if we can go back to the idea of you're not here to play small, you're not here to play small, you are a once in a lifetime cosmic event, and you are the steward for your dreams. It's your job, it's your obligation, that's the gate 27, to fulfill your dreams, to hold those dreams, to be a steward for those dreams. You are a warden for your creative flame. And when you care for your vision, when you care for your dream, that's a sacred trust. And when you do that, you actually reawaken your vitality and you reawaken your courage. And so this week, especially this week, because Mercury and Mars are highlighting the gate 14, which is the gate of creation, or the gate of abundance, right? We're sitting in this really potent space this week where Mars and Mercury are saying, hey, you're supported. There's right work here for you. You have access to everything you need. So do the thing, right? Do the thing. We've got this really potent matrix happening in the backdrop of our dreams. And this is the time to just give ourselves permission to put all the old thoughts, all the old limitations, all of the old narratives aside and just ask ourselves, what if we can? What if you can? What would you do? What's the next right step? Who do you need to be to fulfill that? So let's go on and let's talk about Mercury and Mars. So Mercury and Mars are highlighting the energy, one of the energies where money shows up in the human design chart. And so I also want to just stress money, the theme of money is playing out here on the stage this week. Definitely playing out here on the stage this week. But this also offers us an invitation to widen our definition of abundance. Sometimes we get so locked into thinking abundance is money, but also I want to just remind you that abundance lives in the people bank, right? Abundance lives in trust, in collaboration, in relationship, in community, and in connection that sustains us far beyond numbers. And so I'm not saying money is important, because it is. And we're in this part of this shift that we're in is we're shifting from measuring success with money and numbers to measuring success through quality of life, through well-being, and how much well-being we have access to, and ultimately how much well-being we are capable of creating. And so certainly this week I encourage you to take stock of where things are already good in your life and where prosperity is growing because of your appreciation, which, by the way, is also what Pluto is teaching us, highlighting that gate 60, right? Pluto is saying, hey, you can't innovate if you hate your life. You can't innovate things you hate. We can only innovate things that we notice and appreciate and love, things that are working instead of focusing on the things that are not working. Venus this week highlights the gate 57, so we're wildly dialed in and tuned in and intuitive. But again, this is a splenic gate. So the splenic fear here is the fear of the future. So we've got the potential fear that it's going to be too hard. That's the gate 28. We've got a fear of the future. Venus is highlighting this piece. And at the end of the week, the sun moves to the gate 44, the gate of truth. The earth moves to the gate 24, the gate of blessings. And we're being invited then at that point to investigate our fears of the past, our fears that the patterns of the past are repeating themselves. Well, cool part of that is Saturn right now continues to highlight the gate 36. So we're in this pattern shattering energy that Saturn is bringing. And so even though we might go, this feels familiar, I feel like this old fear is getting triggered, Saturn is saying, time out. No. The past is not going to repeat itself. The past is not repeating itself. And even though it might look like it is, stop. This is new. It's all new. And so what this energy brings us is the opportunity to cultivate new patterns that bring us into deeper states of integrity, new patterns that bring us into deeper harmony and alignment with our value and our self-worth. And so a lot of really gentle reminders that you're not the person you were in the past. You're not the person you were in the past. That's an old story. And for you to acknowledge the story, to take the lessons from the story, take the blessings from the story, but don't use the old story to rationalize settling for less than what you want, right? Because you are wiser now. You have learned to translate fear into faith. All right, some reflections for you this week. Where have you been playing small? Where have you been playing small out of fear that your dreams are too big? Where have you been playing small out of fear that your dreams are too big? Where have you downsized? What does it mean for you to become the steward of your vision instead of the controller of the outcomes? Right? What does it mean for you to become the steward of the vision instead of the controller of the outcomes? Where is the next one? Where can you bank energy? In relationships, in gratitude and well-being, instead of worrying about money. Where are you already experiencing abundance? How can you bank that? By giving it awareness. I'm bringing this up because the nodes shift next week to the 63 and the 64, bringing us a whole new theme. And that new theme is going to be exploring new possibilities. And when we walk into that new theme, solidly entrenched in remembering our abundance and what our definition of abundance is, then that puts us in a place where next week we can start exploring new possibilities, new ideas, new potentials for how we can manifest that abundance in a richer, more rooted place. Last contemplation, how is your intuition What is your connection to your intuition like? Do you feel connected to your intuition? What maybe do you need to add to your daily practice to reconnect with the wisdom of source coming through you? And where are you feeling your intuition? This goes back to strategy and authority to a certain degree. How does it feel in your body when things feel right? Or what pops into your head when something feels right? Or what emotions get activated when something feels right for you? And what does it feel like when something doesn't feel right? And to really practice trusting. Really practice trusting. All right, we're standing at the threshold of a new story. This week asks us to remember that creation is a sacred partnership between us and the cosmos. The real work is not to make something happen. Don't push, don't force. The real work comes when we align ourselves so that whatever it is that we're seeking can find us, so that we're emitting a signature frequency for whatever it is that we intend. Next month is going to bring some challenges. Okay? Next month we've got Mercury retrograde and a whole bunch of other stuff playing out in the celestial weather. But I want you to think of next month as the as the contractions before birth. And it's going to be worth it. Okay? It's going to be worth it. 2026 is going to bring a dramatic energetic shift, a renewal of possibility, if you will. So until then, keep tending to the soil of your dreams, protect what's sacred, steward what's growing. You're not just manifesting something, you're becoming the person who is embodying a new story. And again, don't forget, 2026 Evolution Guide is now available. So grab one now before they sell out, because we've only printed a finite amount. Great gifts for people for the holidays. Shameless plug here. Anyway, be the big dreamer that you are. Don't settle for less. Do not settle for less. You deserve it all. Have a great week. I'll talk to you later.